Don't touch that dial.
Welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast. I'm Scott Curtis, and for episode 5, I've got Zach Boyce. He's from Chicago, and originally from my area. He's originally from the South Bend area, and he moved to Chicago as I was starting to do open mics, so we missed each other, but saw each other around a couple times when he came back into town. Really nice guy, and is making some big swings in the last few months, and this year he's working on recording an album, has got on some bigger stages, and is really stepping up his game. He gave some really excellent insight on what it's like to come from a smaller city like South Bend and getting to a big market, big comedy market in Chicago. Always scary, but a move people need to do if they want to move forward. So it was just an excellent interview. I hope you get some good stuff from it. I've been working on the podcast for 5 episodes now, and I've got a couple others recorded. Would like to hear some feedback from you. Just talk to me, please. People are downloading. I see that, and so I know some people are listening to it. So just let me know what you think. Shoot me an email at scott@thebtbpc.com, or hit me up on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want. Just let me know what you think. One of the things I feel kind of iffy about is the intro music. I put the intro together myself, and I think it's okay, but I want to know what you think. It's starting to bug me every time I hear it, so I don't know if I like it or not. I do appreciate you listening. Once again, if you want to follow us on Facebook, it's the Behind the Bits podcast, and on Twitter, it's the BTBPC, and Instagram, it's Behind the Bits podcast. Would love to have you follow me on all those things so you know what's going on. Zach Boyce was an excellent guest, and I'm going to keep this short because I don't have much voice left. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast. This is Scott Curtis, and I am here with Zach Boyce from Chicago. How's it going, Zach?
Hey, how's it going? Good to hear from you.
Yeah. So you're the first interview I've had that I actually kind of know, so this is kind of nice.
Oh, no. Glad you can talk to a friend, you know?
Yeah. Everybody else I've hit up are like, who the hell are you before I can finally get them to talk to me. So this is very good. So I wanted to talk to you because you're right at that point where you are like probably going to break out. And things are going to start happening. And I want to know, how you got to that point. One thing I know is you're from my hometown of South Bend. You lived there for quite a while and then moved to Chicago. What was it that got you started in doing comedy in the first place?
The crazy thing is I always wanted to do it. I always loved it. My dad was real into stand-up. When I was like an adolescent, like Comedy Central was kind of becoming a big thing, and they were pumping out the half hours. Mm-hmm. And they were just on, and I'd watch them, and I'm like, that would be great, But it never seemed like a real thing, especially in I love South Bend, but I didn't, there were no open mics or anything, right. You don't know any of that. This was pre-internet too. So it was right when AOL, you had to put the 700-hour disc in, and there were no message boards or anything talking about here's a list of open mics and all that stuff. So it was just always one of those weird dreams where you're just like, man, that would be a great job.
Right.
And I would love to do that, but I think you just have to already be famous or something.
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize the back end of all of that.
Right. So when you finally made the plunge, what was the first time you got on stage like?
Oh wow. Okay. So let's see. My goal was, I was 20, I was 25, first of all. And then I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to do it before my 26th birthday. And oddly enough, I had moved into this apartment. And when you went out on my balcony, you could see, I saw this, there was a comedy club. Like, it was just out there. And it, they had a banner that said open mic. And I went, oh, that's it. Like, that's how you do it. And pretty much, I mean, I didn't make it. It was a week after my 26th birthday. I finally went up, but I still count it as completing that goal or whatever. But I went up, and it was one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life. But it was the crazy thing is like that you have that everybody has a fear of it, or, you know, and, but once you do it, I did it once, and it's not like it went great, but I was like, oh, they didn't like Blues Brothers me and throw bottles at me. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, so it's not, I'm like, oh, so that's the worst that happens. I mean, it wasn't the worst that would happen to me, but like, I was like, oh, you're not going to get murdered, you know?
Yeah.
So after that, I was like, oh, I just have to, you just keep doing it. And then,
yeah, that's great. Did you do it over, was it the Laugh Comedy Club that had the open mic?
Yeah, it was a Laugh.
Yeah.
And, and I signed up the week before, and the week before I went, there were like 7 people there, you know?
Right.
So I'm like, oh, this is pretty low stakes. Like,
I'm
like, this is, you know, cause I really like comedy. I was a real nerd about it. And I read about comedians, I read their books and stuff. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to do terribly my first time, and only these 7 people are going to see it. And, but then I signed up the week before, and then the week I went, it was busier than it had ever been. It was,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that's where the fear, like, real, I was like, oh my God, like, there are people here watching.
Right.
I don't know what was going on, but there were an insane amount of people there.
Now, when you did that, did you bring friends along, or did you just go in by yourself and do it?
Well, I think my girlfriend at the time came with me.
Okay.
And that's something I learned, I think a little too late, that I probably should have just not said anything about doing it
yeah.
until I had done it a little bit, you know. But my friends and stuff were supportive, but a lot of my friends and family saw me very early on, and then they're like, oh, okay, this is all right, and then and then there was a big gap until I could pretty much get them to come out again.
Right. Same thing with me. Yeah, I took my wife to my first few mics, and that's okay because she's, you know, we've been together for 37 years. So, you know, she's real with me, and she'll just say, you know, you sucked, or this was good and stuff like that. But I think it was fairly early on, I started inviting people I knew, and that was a pretty big mistake. If you really want to do it, I see the people who bring their 5 or 6 friends to their first open mic, and you know, I usually think, yeah, that's probably not going to go so well unless some sort of a spark flies, and next time we see them, they're going to be by themselves.
Yeah. And then also, you know, like, and then, I mean, that's the thing about all of this. There's no real rules, but generally speaking, like, there's a comedian I started with, Jake Wells, and he was funny right out of the gate. So it's like, yeah, you bring all of your people, but there's that weird catch-22 where when you're starting, the people that run the rooms are like, bring people. Right. So you almost have to bring people. Yeah. So it's hard, but ideally you do it kind of for a little bit until you kind of have something to say, you know?
Right. And then friends and family don't understand how many times you have to say a joke before it gets funny sometimes. So, I mean,
they don't really.
I mean, it
You're
takes
up there just talking.
Yeah, it takes so long to get a decent 5 minutes. You just got to say the stuff enough times that you get the timing right, and you cut out all the crap, and actually have something funny to work with.
Absolutely.
So thinking about that, so you probably got kind of bit by the bug when you were doing it. So I guess you were probably doing mics and stuff like that. One of the things I like to ask is, when do you feel like you had your solid 10 minutes? So, from the time you started to the time you had it, where you had a really good, tight 10-minute set.
Honestly, I'd say, that's tough, because I feel like I went up. I feel like some people start and they're naturally good. They're funny. They can kind of like, you can just listen to them talk for 10 minutes. I don't feel like I had that at all. I was just, I was just nervous. I wasn't confident and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say the first time I did over 10 minutes was probably close to a year in. And then it probably took another year to have like a good solid 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So like roughly 2 years where I'm like, all right, I got 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. I can like confidently tell somebody if they're like, you got 10 minutes. I'm like, yeah.
And really, that's the hard thing to explain to folks who are just starting out. They think you're just going to jump in and you're going to write 10 minutes of gold and it's just going to be great. And, I look back, and I am by no means any type of a professional comic or anything like that, but I look back at the stuff I did, at the beginning, which was like 5 years ago, and I do very little of that stuff, or I totally rewrote it. And it's a totally different bit now, and you churn through stuff, and stuff that was okay becomes funnier, and then stuff that you thought was okay just has to go because it's not good.
Oh yeah, and then there's that thing where when you start, you don't know, and so like me and my peers that I started with, we wrote a lot, and we were all like, yeah, probably got like 20 minutes, and then
yeah. And
then you go up and you're like, oh, I have one good joke.
Right.
I have a piece of one good joke. I have 3 minutes maybe. And yeah, I'm in a couple of months, I'll be 7 years in, and I don't do, and like, I looked recently at I have the very first piece of paper with all of my first stuff on it. I don't do anything remotely close to any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It usually goes away. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just really work. And the only way you can practice and the only way you can get good is to just do it in front of people. And you're going to suck like 80% of the time your first couple of years. And it's just, it's just what it is. So if you want to be serious, you just got to do the thing. And, it's just like any other job. It takes a while before you get good at it.
Yeah, and it's the only one where I've heard comedians say this before, where like if you're in a band, you can practice in your garage or your basement until you got it down. And stand up's literally the only thing where you just have to be bad in front of people for a while, unless you're lucky, unless you're some phenom or wunderkind.
Yeah, like a Robin Williams or something. You just walk in and explode, and everything's cool. Yeah. And one of the things that I think that you probably found in South Bend when you first started was it's a pretty nice group of comics that are hanging out, and you can actually talk to them and approach them and ask them how my set went and get advice and stuff like that. And it's not like that everywhere.
Oh yeah, South Bend. I'm so grateful that I started there, and I started at a weird time where, pretty much when I started there, the old guard had kind of like, there used to be a Funny Bone in South Bend, and all of those people were still around, but there wasn't any real central club. So they kind of just did bar shows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that when, the Drop Comedy Club came up, and even when Laugh kind of became a little more established, they were around again. And when the new people came in, they were all so cool about they were so cool about giving advice and pointers, and they're very supportive. It's like a real small city kind of vibe where there's only a handful of us, but we're all in it together. And there was definitely space for everybody, so there was no need for it. There wasn't a lot of a mean competitive spirit to it at all. It felt like we were all family, honestly, that were just trying to put shows on and have fun doing stand up.
Yeah, and that's been so good for me. I think the first mic I did was at Chicory, and so I think it was Jim Kliss and Patrick Fowler, and it was either Jason Staples or Mark Stuck sitting at a table, and there was an open chair. And I went with my wife, and I said, those guys look like comics. I'm going to go sit with them. So I sat down and introduced myself, and they kind of looked at me. I mean, I was 50 when I started, so I was a little older than those guys, a little long in the tooth. But after we started talking, I've been in sales forever, so I can talk to just about anybody. And I got them talking to me, and they started giving me advice on where to go and what to do. They told me about the Drop. I didn't even know about the Drop at that time, and we've talked and been friends ever since. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for mainly the Drop. That was the big one where it was all these new comics, and it's almost, and even the people that had been doing it for a while, where we weren't really bound by whatever. I feel like a lot of bigger cities and stuff have a lot of unwritten rules, you got to do this, you got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any of that. We were all just buddies. Trying to help each other out. And I'm so, my first 3 comic I've been, and I feel extremely grateful.
Right. Yeah. It was funny because I had been doing, South Bend for, I guess, 3 years, and I went through Nashville for work quite a bit. So I stayed pretty close to Nashville. So one night, couple 3 years ago, I decided to go to one of the clubs there that was having an open mic, and I went there and I tried to talk to some of the other comics, and they were just kind of on one side of the room, and I was on the other side of the room. they had nothing to say. And then when they brought me up, it pissed me off about more than anything. It was about the closest I'd been to a bar fight in a long time. But they brought me up, and my handwriting's not great, but my name is Scott Curtis, and the guy said, Scott Cuntus, and I was so pissed I could barely do my act. I wanted to grab the guy by the throat and just take him outside. So that's a little different. But then
it's crazy,
Yeah, but then last year I did a mic at a different room. I think it was it's the Cobra Room or something like that. It's in a different part of town, and all those people were totally cool. And it was a totally different group of people, and they were all really nice.
Yeah, I feel like when you get to the bigger cities, you don't have just one group of comics. So then it's a little harder to net. It in essence becomes kind of cliquey. And it's just because there's so many people, and when you have that many personalities, it's naturally going to pair off into groups. And when you go to these smaller cities with these smaller scenes, you don't have South Bend, and then there's a lot of places in Michigan like Kalamazoo or Grand Rapids or Lansing where it's only 30 or 40 people. And they're all friends. It's not big enough to where there's going to be a ton of cliquishness. So usually those places are super inviting. And when I started, that was, we were in South Bend, right on the Indiana-Michigan border. So we drive to those small Michigan places, and it was just like driving to another small group. Like all the groups were far enough apart to where we didn't feel like we were actively competing with each other.
Right.
So it made us all really good friends. And I feel very lucky.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be when you're starting out.
Right. And there is in the South Bend area, when, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids is there, and even Fort Wayne, there's a lot of stuff within a couple hours that you can get to, Gary. Just a lot of cool places you can go. And it's really nice to, first of all, get in front of a different audience than you had been in front of for a while. And second of all, just watching the other comics and what they do and learning from them too.
Yeah, and you see people like, and you're like, who is this person? Like, this person's amazing.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, you see, you're in Chicago, you see him headlining and stuff. It's like it's crazy stuff. Like, right. It just goes to show you, like, you don't know. It's like you should only like. There's no reason to not be friendly because you don't know. And how stupid would you feel if you felt like you were hot stuff and you're trying to big time these people and you move or you try to move a step up and these people are now even over you and they're going to remember when you're like, oh yeah, you said my name wrong, like you disrespected me.
Yeah. I still get mad every time I say that, Scott Kuntis, just stop it.
I get it. Yeah. I had a lot of that where it's, being where I was one of the few black comics. So you get a lot of really bad intros. The only black guy is up. Here we go. Make sure you got your keys, and you're like, all right.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm definitely going to rob you. I don't know why you would say that.
That is just such bullshit. That's bad. But anyway, so you have a definite, I guess, a very personal point of view in your act. And, you talk about yourself, you talk about your friends, you talk about your parents and, your nerdiness and stuff like that. Is that how it started, or how did you evolve? One of the things I like to try to find out is when comics find their voice, because that's one of the things everybody I've talked to so far is you got to find your voice and you got to figure out who you are.
Yeah. I feel like even now I'm still figuring it out, but definitely in the beginning it was hard. I think when you start, you generally try to emulate the comedians you like, so you'll kind of write jokes like them, the people you see on TV, and you kind of sound like them, and you may not necessarily be talking about stuff you care about, but you're like, oh, this is what I should talk about. And also sometimes other comics will, and I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but I know when I started, I did want to talk about race, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Being one of the only, comedians of color when I started, sometimes you would get people would be like, oh, well, maybe you should try and talk about other stuff. Cause then you're just the comic that talks about black stuff and, you don't want to get pigeonholed and it got in my head a little. Yeah. And in the beginning, I kind of steered away from it because I was like, well, yeah, I don't want to I want people to know that but it was the worst advice because it's what I wanted to talk about. And it's something that I was, it was experience. It was personal experience.
Exactly.
So it was like, I'm just blocking off this whole chunk of potential material because I'm worried about what somebody thinks. And it took a while to get over that. And like my first jokes that were like really good were talking about that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that person had no idea what they were talking about. They just, I don't know if they didn't want to hear about it or whatever. And I feel like if I were to give anyone any advice, it would be literally talk about what you want to talk about and what you know. And that's the most, that'll get you on a track faster than anything. Don't limit yourself to, what you think like, oh, well, I'm a woman in comedy and they don't want to hear me talk about woman stuff. It's like, no, talk about it. You should talk about it. You're the only person that should be talking about it.
Right. And really, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. I mean, race has been part of comedy pretty much since it started. And if you have a fresh take on it and your own personal experience, then it's different and it's a story. And if you can do it right, then it's worth it. And obviously that's your personal experience and that's your voice. So you're going to do that better than, a dick joke or something like that.
Exactly. Nobody can tell your story, Yeah. So, like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you talk about your life and your experience as whoever you are? And it's crazy. I think about it sometimes, and it's crazy to me because you do see newer comics, and they're like, oh well, I want people to know that I'm not, just an Asian person, or that I'm just, somebody with a disability. And it's like, but you are that person.
Yeah.
That's part of you that you shouldn't shut off because you're worried about what somebody else thinks.
Right. And if you're like the only Asian person in Napanee, then you've got a lot of good stories. So go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah. And you got a lot of, you're saying stuff that nobody else can speak to. Yeah. You're almost the authority on it. And then, and I always feel a little conflicted about this, but I think in the beginning when it's like, I think we're a lot better in a better space in comedy in general now, but it used to be a lot like, they're like, oh, we need a black guy. So, and if you're the black guy, like you're going to get put up a lot, or it's like, oh, we need a woman on the show.
Yeah.
And it's like, I got spots because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the beginning, it's hard because it's like, you got to get up and get good. And generally, however you can do it, you should do it until you're at a level where you can be like, no, that I don't have to do that.
Right.
But people, I feel like sometimes comedy draws people that are maybe a little jealous or insecure, and they're gonna give you crap no matter what you do. And all you can do is ignore them.
Exactly. Yeah. And do your thing, because it's what the audience, it's the response from the audience that matters. So that's all,
exactly.
all you should care about. And just for the sake of everybody listening, Napanee, Indiana is very white and very Amish, just so you know. So there's just not a big Asian population there.
No, Napanee. I think I did a show there in a barn on the back of a flatbed truck.
There you go.
There were horses behind me. It was very terrifying. I think one of my jokes, I was like, I'll just hop on one of these horses and get the hell out of here. Like I'm not messing around with you people.
Yeah, no doubt. That's great. That's just hilarious. So you've been going for about 7 years now. Have you ever, how many times have you just wanted to quit? Have you gotten low enough that you just wanted to walk away from it?
I feel like I've gotten close. I think deep down, I don't think I can ever stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very compulsive drive to do this, and I don't. it's something I've always wanted to do. But there's been times, especially moving to Chicago, when you're in this giant city, when you're the big fish in the small pond, and then you go into the ocean. It's very jarring. And then you're like, oh, maybe I can't do this. I've doubted myself before. I think I don't know if I've ever had an instance where I'm like, I'm going to stop. I don't want to do this anymore. I've had hard times where I'm like, I don't know why I do this.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've ever stopped. And also, I know people that have stopped, and I'm so happy for them. It's so soul crushing sometimes. I've had people that I've started with stop, and they seem so much happier, and they get their nights back and healthy relationships.
Yeah,
they're not drinking in a bar every night.
And what folks don't understand is, say you're doing a feature act, and you're going around, and you're driving, 3-4 hours to do the feature set, and maybe you're coming home because you can't afford a hotel. And the reality of that is almost everybody is working a full-time job in addition to that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And that's what I respect a lot, because I'm obviously, I'm not going to do that. But what I see comics doing, some of the guys around here, they're all working full-time jobs. They're getting sets in Chicago, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, wherever, Fort Wayne, and just working all weekend, and then going back to work and doing it again. And a lot of folks don't understand that, you're putting in between your job and driving and writing and performing, it's a 70-hour work week for you.
Yeah. Imagine having 2 jobs, and one of them you just you lose money. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy. You imagine if you had a 50-hour a week job and you didn't make any money from it.
Yeah.
And it pissed off your significant other, just imagine, like, when I remember I used to drive from South Bend to Chicago every Wednesday after working a 14-hour shift.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'd be here all night just to do open, just to go up for 3.5 minutes at a time, and that's what it takes. There's a comedian in Michigan, his name's Robert Jenkins, and he said my favorite thing, where he's like, if you really want to do stand-up, if you're really going for it, he's like, something in your life has to give. Like, he's like, you're going to lose something else. He said, for me, it's sleep. He's like, I don't get enough sleep at all. Like, he's like, that's just out of the window for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's true. Like, but I think there's various levels to it. I think it's fine if you do it as a hobby. If you just go to the open mic every Tuesday, you're just as valuable to that group of comics than the people that are driving to Grand Rapids and driving, like, you do it however much you want to do it. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. Right.
But if you want to do it and you want that to be your job, that's a different set of skills that you need to develop. And that is just doing it. I mean, I talked to Tom Dreesen, was my first interview. And, when he drove out to LA, he was just living in his car. Because he didn't have any money, and all he had to do were the sets at the Comedy Store, and that's all he had. And fortunately it worked out for him, but I think it was a couple 3 months that he was just living in his car doing his sets, and finally getting what he wanted, and that was getting on the Carson show.
Yeah. I know comics here that they live in their car.
Yeah.
And they have a job, and they have a gym membership where that's where they shower every day.
Yeah. That's actually a good idea. I wish that was around when I was a kid.
Yeah, you get a gym membership, you sleep in your car, and you eat McChickens for 6 months.
Yeah,
I know people.
No, that's not healthy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they might be giving up a little too much stuff to do comedy.
Yeah,
but I do respect it.
Now, at one point, I think this may have been when you were still in South Bend, but we've got a comedy club here called The Drop, and you were you got into ownership of that club. Were you still in South Bend, or were you in Chicago at the time?
I was in South Bend.
Okay.
I wasn't even a year into doing stand-up.
Okay. And you got the group you were in, that was you, and was it you and Jake and who else?
Yeah, it was me, Jake Wells, Jonathan Balazan, friend Daniel Janicki, Ben Conowitz, and Brad Oman.
Okay.
We were all brand new comics. And he had been doing it for a couple of years. And at the point where he was ready to, he's like, I got a family and stuff, and I'm running this business that doesn't, it takes all this time, and I can't do it, and we had just started, and we had grown to love The Drop so much. Like, we were like, this is our spot. Like, if we lose this, we have nothing here. So he reached out to John Baldazan, and was like, would you want to take it over? Because John had just started, and he was making moves. He really dove in deep. He was booking shows and all this, and John was like, yeah. And, I think James, you should bring some people on, because it's not something to be done alone, because it's a lot of work.
Right.
And John just reached out to all of us. He reached out to me and was like, who else should I bring on? And, we basically picked 4 more people that we thought would be fit to run it. And we all ran for a few years, and it was a very, very valuable learning experience.
Right. Right. And just so people know, the Drop is part of a restaurant. The Dewdrop has been there for, I think, since the 50s, and it was built on, and it's a comedy club that's off to the side of it. And I think it's probably max 60, 70 seater if you take all the tables out. And
you take all the tables out and put nothing in the chairs, it fits 103 people.
Okay, 103, cool.
Yeah.
I saw Haywood Banks Haywood Banks there last year, and I think that it was pretty full then, but I didn't count people.
Yeah.
So one of the things, since you got into the point where not only are you fairly new at doing stand-up, but now you're at a point where you're actually talking to other comics and booking them. One of the things that I think a lot of comics don't know is what they need to get booked, and how to act to the booker when you're talking to them. I mean, do you have any examples of people who did really well and people who were just like dead to you after you talked to them?
I mean, honestly, when it comes to The Drop, we were lucky in the ability of us having the ability to book people. And we were I feel like we were comedians first, and then we just happened to run this club. So our booking procedures were, we went out and saw a lot of people just do shows, and we'd meet these people, and we only booked nice people. Like, we only booked people that were professional and serious about it, and people that were people that really gave off the sense that they would appreciate being able to do a weekend, and it wouldn't, like, because it's like we didn't even book ourselves to feature our headline until basically the end of our tenures there, because as comics we're like, well, yeah, we don't have 45 minutes to
Yeah.
They're like, I wouldn't book me right now. And so I think there must be one or two people who we like maybe took a chance on and they ended up being jerks.
Yeah.
Like rude about getting paid and stuff and trying to, squeeze more money out. But generally speaking, I'd say 99.5% of the people we booked were cool people, great that, some of these people now you're seeing them on Comedy Central, like they're writing for some of the biggest shows on TV. I'm really proud of the people we got up at that club. And I'm really impressed by how nice and professional most good comedians are. Like they're just those things usually go hand in hand. Like
right.
Crazy.
Yeah, and I mentioned that because Jim, who's one of the owners now, one of the conversations I had with him is when I was talking about doing this podcast, he said you need to do a episode just about how to act when you're trying to book yourself. So I think I think first of all, the drop's getting pretty popular right now. There's some buzz around it, and so they're getting more people approaching them instead of you going out and trying to get people in. So it's a different situation. But I just know that he talked about one dude that sent a message to him, and it's like, I'm really good. This is my final message to you. If you don't book me, you don't know what talent is, something like that. And it's like, okay, you're never going to be on the show. Anyway, one of the things that is important for people to know is to be, kind and respectful when you're trying to book yourself, and always just be nice, like you should be to everybody, and that'll go a long ways into getting booked. And when somebody says you're not ready yet, just get more ready. Don't get pissed off.
Yeah, and then a lot of it is, be nice. There's no reason to not be nice. It's like you can be an asshole if you want, but there's 1,000 people in line that are nice and just as good as you. Yeah. So why would you pick a jerk?
Yeah.
There's no reason to not be nice and professional. And also, you shouldn't take it personal if you don't. Like I said, there's so many comedians right now. There's so many good comedians. There's so many comedians that, deserve a shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always because you're not ready. It might be the people that are booking aren't ready for you. Like they don't have the space for you. You look at the drop and it's, do a show pretty much every weekend. And, taking off holidays and stuff, but it's probably like 40, you get 45 weekends. So that's 45 people you can book to headline, and maybe a little more than that to feature if you're, picking different features for different days.
Yeah.
And, that's not a lot of people.
Right.
I know I'm going to go see 50 comedians today at an open mic. Like that's a whole year at the drop, you know, and that's one open mic. There's thousands and thousands of comedians.
Right.
So it's like, you stay nice the whole time. You keep working on it, keep getting better, keep being respectful. And if you just keep doing that, you will get booked. Like people will put you up.
Yeah.
People notice.
And the funny thing is they have to have a variety of comics variety of types of comics in order to get different audiences in, and you just may not be the type they want for this coming weekend or the next few coming weekends. I mean, you can't do 6 weekends of prop comics, and actually you probably shouldn't do any, but you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
And that goes back to talking about what you know and being yourself. Because if you're yourself, you're not put in any box, and you get as close to that as you can, and it'll be easy to get booked because there's nobody that can book like you.
Right.
But you do have to mix it up. it makes for better shows.
Yeah.
You have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So after you were managing and had some ownership in the drop for a while, you decided to move to Chicago. So what was that like?
So yeah, we'd been in South, I started comedy in South Bend and we fell into the drop pretty early, and we'd been doing it for a few years, and I always knew that I would have to go somewhere else if I wanted to keep doing this at a level that I wanted to do it at. And we eventually, just like me and a couple other of the drop owners, were like, I think it's time to go. The drop was pretty much the only game in town, and we spent a lot of time running that, and we'd get out when we could, but we needed more. And yeah, so in 2016, we packed up and we moved to Chicago, and it was scary. I've never lived anywhere else. I've never lived outside of South Bend or Mishawaka. Mm-hmm. So that was my first big move. So it was real scary. But I'm so happy I did it,
Right.
And also moving to a big city we booked a lot from Chicago. So it was very jarring to be doing open mics, where you're doing 4 minutes and the person right before you is somebody you booked for, I'm like, you're a professional comedian and you're in line with me. I don't understand. Mm-hmm. And it's a little daunting. It was hard at first.
Yeah.
But you adjust,
Yeah. Yeah. I know that things have gone well for you. It was just, this last week, you are part of the Comedians You Should Know, show. And that started out with 200 people. Is that right?
Yeah, they did this giant audition where they did these 3 humongous open mics. People did 4 or 3 minutes, and they went through 200 comedians. Uh-huh. And they whittled it down to about 24, and I was one of those people. And then I think from that they're gonna see who they're gonna put on this year, and I don't know who that is yet, but mm-hmm. I'm extremely flattered that, and it's very vindicating that I'm good enough to do what I think is the best show in the city.
Right. That's a huge move, and obviously a testament to all the work you've put in, and it took about 6 or 7 years, didn't it?
Yeah, it took me, it took me 7 years. Yeah. And it's, I know comics that did Comedians You Should Know 2 years in, and it's just how it works.
Yeah.
But I'm happy for those comics. I'm glad they didn't have to, they didn't have to sit through some very nightmarish open mics. I feel like a lot of people get bitter or whatever, but I've loved comedy since I was a 10-year-old. So I like when people are good and I get to see them go up and do more and get better.
Right.
I'm happy that I'm even, approaching where people I really admire have been. Mm-hmm. It's nice.
Right. Right. And I think I really appreciate the way you approach your peers. And this is something, I don't ever, it's always going to be a hobby for me, but for you, it's your vocation. This is what you want to do. And you can sit back and appreciate when somebody does well. And that type of thing, it just, that makes you more of a giving person, obviously, and having some empathy and just caring about people. But being excited when people do well it's hard, because as comics, we're all a little broken anyway, and it's hard to be happy when you see somebody passing you up. But it's really, if you can do that and be truly happy for them, I think that makes life easier, and you don't get ulcers and stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is another thing that I feel like newer comics don't realize. We took the drop over. We were even a year in. I think, especially in the beginning, it's just as important to watch professionals do it than it is to like go up.
Yep.
And that's, I think, with the people running the drop, the reason we all like jumped in, I think, ability so quickly was we were there every weekend watching people that get paid to do comedy do comedy.
Yeah.
These people we were getting a master class on what you need to do to headline and like what it takes.
Yeah.
And, at the drop, even now, like it's comics get in free. So I hope all those new comics are utilizing, that valuable pool of information. It will do you wonders.
Yes, exactly.
And you should, and like you said, you should like watching. You should like seeing good comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
The only thing that's a little bit different when you're watching and trying to learn is it's a little bit harder to be in the moment because you're grabbing your phone and taking notes. Hey, that was really good, and the way they transitioned or whatever. We went to see Nathan McIntosh in Grand Rapids this last weekend, and I was totally able to be in the moment, mostly because I'd been drinking all day and I wasn't thinking too much, and he just cracked me up. So that was a good show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think when you do it, you kind of, it's hard to appreciate it as an audience member. You're like, oh, yeah, that's funny. And it's like, you should just laugh. What do you do? Laugh. They like that.
Yeah. Definitely take that time to laugh because that's what they're looking for sure. I also know that you are starting to record your first comedy album, CD, whatever you want to call it. How's that going for you?
It's been a learning experience. It's a lot of work. Like even like, cause you think about like, so when you want to get booked, you need like a good clip to send to bookers. Like that's hard to do. That's hard for all the stars to align. Like you got the camera working, you got a good audience, a good show, and you get a good intro, and you get to go up and you have a good set. That's a lot of things for a 5-minute clip.
Yeah.
And so now I'm trying to do that for a 45-minute piece of material.
Right.
And, I started doing it. I was hoping when I just headlined the drop a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I'll have 3 shows to do it. And, I ended up only having one viable part of one of the shows where I got anything. So
yeah, I'm
going to have to do some more shows and stuff and, really piece it together. But I'm glad I'm doing it. I've always wanted to do it. So
right.
I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. And I look back at some of the first recordings of some of the comics I like, and when you do that, you've got something to look back on and compare it to, and all that kind of stuff, and also get your name out there. So that's but I know just from I did another podcast for a while. I know how much work it goes into editing and finding what you want, and I love this part of doing a podcast where I talk to people. The editing, the uploading, the promoting, all that other crap. I'd rather not have to do, but you got to do what you got to do. That way I can talk to more people like you. So that it makes it worth it.
Oh, well, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
I think most comedians are like that. They're like, we just want to do comedy.
Yeah.
Maybe we're a little lazy in nature.
Yeah.
I just want to go up and talk for an hour and then I can pay my rent.
No doubt. Well, Zach, I really appreciate you being on the show. A lot of good info for people who are getting into comedy, and I just wish you the best because you're nice. You did a show that I was putting on and barely even knew me, and just said yes. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really loved doing your show. I think this is a really cool thing you're doing for people that are starting. I didn't have stuff like this when I started, so
right.
You're doing the Lord's work.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a million comedy podcasts. I just want this one to be special. So I'm hoping to create a community and not just a podcast, so that we can get together and chat and talk about the business and stuff like that. So that's the hope for it.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, I want you to have a great rest of your day, and everybody look for Zach Boyce at clubs near you. I know that he's performing a lot in Chicago, but I know you do a little bit of traveling too. So I wish you the best, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.